So far, we've covered a lot of ground about how our full system reacts or responds to every situation we're in. Now we're going to look at the ways we view every situation from a lens of our memory. Our memories are so powerful, sometimes it's hard to be sure if what we're experiencing in the present moment comes from what's happening right now or because of what we've experienced in the past. Most of the time, it's probably a combination of both. This is not necessarily a bad thing if we can recognize how our history may be influencing the current situation. In order to recognize this influence, we need to gather the full system clues about our current situation and then see how they might be triggers for our past experiences or our traumas. This last piece of the full system puzzle may connect more to experience of trauma than some of the other elements. How, when, and why our trauma memories impact you is likely the main problem you were having when you started this journey. Memory research is changing all the time as newer technologies help us see more of what happens when we remember something. Now we can actually see how our brains physically hold and react to memory. We're also learning that memory is not constant or unchanging. In fact, our memories physically change in our brains the instant we bring them up in our minds. As Dan Siegel states, remembering is not merely the reactivation of an old memory. It is the construction of a new neural net profile with features of the old memory and elements of memory from other experiences, as well as influence from our present state of mind. As we rebuild our neural net profile, which is the brain connections for any one memory, the views and how we remember change as well. This is extremely hopeful for trauma survivors. As we learn to tolerate and stay present to our trauma memories instead of avoiding and pushing them back down, our memory of the event changes, both physically in our neurology and in the way that we look at the memory itself. It's highly recommended that you watch the video Memory Hackers by following the link in the introduction to this section. The entire video is fascinating. The biggest takeaway, though, is that scientists can now watch the neurons in our brains grow new proteins and then connect to other proteins when we remember something. This appears to be the way our memory changes as it keeps making new connections to other information. This is also a huge part of how we learn new information and then connect it to information that we've learned from the past. As we briefly covered in our full system review, there's two kinds of memories. One type is explicit, and the other is implicit. Explicit memory is probably what you think of when you hear the word memory. The primary factor in explicit memory is that we are fully aware of the memory when it's stored and when we bring that memory back up again. The main two types of explicit memory are autobiographical facts and semantic information. Our autobiographical facts is how we store and remember our personal histories. These are the facts that go along with that, which is a little bit different than the autobiography we have in the right side of our brain, which is really more about the sensations and ideas we experienced without being able to put words to it. In some cases, with our autobiographical facts, that memory can go much deeper and includes how we felt and thought and experienced these events, almost as if we were back in that moment. The other type of memory is factual or semantic. It's all of the facts that we've learned throughout our life. Some of this comes through things like going to school. Some of it happens more naturally through things like reading or watching the news or just an information that we gather through different conversations we might have. It's facts we learn from other people's experiences rather than our own. Implicit memory is a little more complicated and much harder to explain. It's memory that we store outside of being aware of it. This memory lives as sensations and non-verbal ideas. It's triggered without us realizing we are remembering. This can happen in three primary ways. The first is memory we have from when we're babies until we're about 18 months old. The part of our brain responsible for storing long-term memory doesn't completely develop until we're somewhere between 18 and 24 months old. Also, we don't have any vocabulary or words yet that would enable us to describe our experiences. Without these words, there's no ways to think and store the memories. However, we still store these memories as sensations in our bodies, and they can be recalled years later. This is easy to see in children who experienced early trauma at birth or who were neglected and abused as infants or children. These kiddos have no real conscious memory of the events. However, they have strong reactions to life and an inability to calm down that seems to indicate they have many memories that are happening outside of their awareness. Once again, Dan Siegel states regarding infants and memories, repeated experience of terror and fear can be ingrained within the circuits of the brain as states of mind. With chronic or repeated occurrence, these states become more readily activated or retrieved in the future, so that they become characteristic traits of the individual. In this way, our lives can become shaped by reactivations of implicit memory, which lack a sense of something being recalled. The second type of implicit memory is the processes and procedures we develop over the years. One way to recognize these is to think about how you would try to describe one of these processes without actually doing it at the same time. For instance, tying your shoes is a great one. You usually tie your shoes without thinking about what you're doing, and if you had to describe it without doing it, it would be challenging. These processes are healthy and helpful in our everyday lives. They allow us to focus on other things while we complete these processes. However, since these processes run in the background outside of our general awareness, they can become implicit triggers if we were engaged in them before or during our trauma experiences. The third way implicit memory happens is whenever we are emotionally overwhelmed. In these cases, the safety/danger part of our brain takes over. This part of our brain is not designed to store memory. It ends up scattering information throughout the right side of our brain in bits and pieces. One of the bad things about this is the bits and pieces of information get so scattered they no longer connect to the setting of what was happening at the time. When this happens, these small fragments can become full-blown triggers and reminders for trauma without us realizing that they're connected to the trauma itself. Realizing we might be affected by this type of implicit memory gives us a better chance to understand shifts in our state of mind that might come from the environment or the people that we're with. Paraphrasing another quote from Dan Siegel, implicit memory can change quickly outside of our awareness. This sometimes creates sudden changes in our state of mind and interactions with others. In this way, transference, or feeling like someone we are with is the person who hurt us, is the start of old mental models and states of mind from our relationships in the past. This happens all the time. Knowing about implicit memory gives us a chance to free ourselves from repeated behaviors and automatic reactions that are more driven by the past and current situations. Implicit memory subconsciously pays attention to the environment that's going on around us. The environment can trigger trauma memories without the thoughts really being noticed. We only sense that something's changed without being able to identify what that was. The environment is in the background, yet can still strongly influence us without us realizing it. This is especially true in trauma situations where pieces of the event are scattered throughout our brain due to being overwhelmed. These fragments can bring up the same state of mind we were in during our trauma episodes without us being able to understand these changes are actually connected to our implicit memories of the event. There's so much more related to memory and how it interacts with different parts of our brain and body that we really could look at. For now, this is enough information for us to continue our work towards healing. And as we consider memory, some of the important points to remember are: memory is powerful and always affects what we're experiencing in the present moment. Explicit memory is memory we are aware of and consists of facts we have learned and our autobiography. Implicit memory is memory we are not aware of and comes from our experiences as an infant, processes and procedures we automatically perform and our overwhelming emotional experiences. Memory can and does physically and cognitively change every time the memory surfaces.